A few weeks ago, I posted something on LinkedIn after the federal budget was announced. One text message with one paragraph, maybe around 60 words, and let's just say it blew up in my face. After getting thousands of views, people were completely furious with me. Some also agree with what I said, basically accusing me of everything from being completely out of touch to being the smartest thing they'd heard and read all year. Now here's what I said. Negative gearing is not a tool for the wealthy. It's a tool for the poor and the working class to try and break out of poverty. And that calling this all about inequality, which is what the federal Labor government has been spouting since the budget, is completely incorrect and completely misleading. Apparently that's touched a nerve with some of you. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go through the actual comments, the disagreements, the pushback, and the people who think that I'm dead wrong. I'm going to respond to each one of them, not in a LinkedIn comment box. I'm going to do this properly. I'm Corey Jones, and I've helped hundreds of everyday clients generate over $100 million in equity in the last 6 years of running this company. And today I'm going to break down what wealth actually looks like, why negative gearing works the opposite way that most people think, and I'm going to address every major argument that came back at me so you can decide for yourself who's actually right. Now, firstly, to start with, I'm going to read word for word exactly what I texted my team. Now keep in mind, this was actually a text that I'd sent to my accountant when he sent me back his feedback about the budget changes. I sent that text as a screenshot to my marketing team, who then uploaded it on our LinkedIn. Here's what I said. People don't understand that negative gearing is an outcome of using the minimum deposit to get into the market. The rich do not do that. The rich use companies and trusts without the requirements of the tax breaks. It's actually the poor breaking out of poverty who use it the most. To say this is all in the name of inequality is gross. So that was what I'd said. Now, to be fair, most people's problems are probably more in the semantics than anything else. All right. And really when I'm using the word poor. All right. Now, just to be clear, from all the lashback that I got, most of it is around the fact that, poor people simply can't buy investment properties and poor people are impoverished, they can't buy houses. But here's the problem with that thinking. Most of you who've responded are actually poor and you don't even realize it. Just notice when you look at the comments, the absolute famine mentality coming from what you're saying. That, guys, is what I'm saying when I say poor. Now, here's the reality. We've all been sold a dream. That is absolute bullshit. Go and get a good education, so you can go and get yourself a good job. Now, what's a good job? It's a high-paying job. So just notice that as children, we are conditioned to believe that money is so important. In fact, more important than your happiness and your mental health. We go work in some bullshit job for 50 plus years working with some other wanker. For example, doing things like insurance. I'm sure as a child, you probably didn't dream of being an insurance broker at that point. However, you're going to spend 50 years working for somebody else, all while doing the right thing by buying a home, paying your taxes, putting money into your super, so that you can barely even retire and barely even survive, assuming that you're going to have the pension in retirement, which is welfare. That, guys, is absolute poverty, and most of you are walking that pathway and you don't even realize that you are walking the pathway of poverty. Now, the way that I see it, there is the rich and there is the poor, and it starts with mindset. Wealth is a mindset, guys. The wealthy have autonomy of their time. They have free time, they've got freedom, they've got assets, and it pays them so they don't actually have to go to work anymore. Where the poor are the ones who are trapped working forever for somebody else as bona fide modern day slaves. Now, I want to give you a real life example of this. Well, what I really mean when I say this. I've got a client. This client earns over $1 million per year, and yet he works 15-hour days. His family hates him. He works too much, never sees his kids. He is miserable. That dude is poor as shit. He just takes nicer holidays. He just drives a nicer car. But at the end of the day, guys, he is broker than most. At the same time, I've got a couple who's a client. Now, this couple earns $150,000 a year combined. They have 5 investment properties, and they've got the choice if they actually want to go to work or not. Now, guys, they are earning almost 1/10 of what the other client is, and yet they're actually wealthy because they've got freedom and autonomy of their time. Now, the overall point that I'm trying to make here is that negative gearing is a strategy that is used and deployed by the poor and the working class to actually allow themselves to get ahead. Now, what I'm saying, wealthy people do not need to rely on negative gearing. Wealthy people use companies and trusts where negative gearing doesn't actually apply. Now, let me give you a real life example of this. In fact, I'm going to walk you through my strategy. The first 5 houses that I purchased in my own personal name and absolutely was relying on negative gearing, 110%. Now, once those 5 houses were purchased, they were offsetting my income of around $200,000 a year. The point is, if I've got 5 houses that are providing me tens of thousands of dollars each in tax deductions, that means that my $200,000 income, I'm not paying tax on $200,000 anymore because my negatively geared investment properties are now offsetting my income. Now, I'm paying no tax with the 5 properties. What that then means, there is now no actual benefit to me continuing buying houses from a tax effective perspective. And therefore, why the hell would I ever want to purchase them in my own name and put more risk onto me? when I can now use companies and trusts and other entity structures to now hold onto those assets. Now, like I said, guys, I'm not sitting here saying that, the poor are the poor, or the rich are the rich, or I'm not getting into that argument. What I'm essentially saying is this: to say that these changes are in the guise of trying to attack the rich to help the poor is absolute effing nonsense. The wealthy do not need negative gearing. Negative gearing is a function of you using the minimum deposit to buy a house. Wealthy people can buy in cash where it's positively geared. Wealthy people can put down 30, 40, 50% deposits on properties. They don't need to rely on negative gearing. Most wealthy people have already offset their own personal income tax. So any investment property they buy, they're using companies and trusts. Any sophisticated investor who's doing things like development projects, which all roads lead to development, they would only ever do those in companies and trusts purely because of the way the tax system works. They simply would not be accumulating negatively geared properties. Negatively geared properties is literally what the poor and the working class use to get ahead. That's what I'm saying. Here's an analogy. Let's say we're playing baseball. We've got your swinging at the start. You've got your 3 bases. Negative gearing is basically the first base of most people's strategies. When we get into that second base looking for high cash flow, high risk properties, and the third base we're getting to developments, none of this stuff applies. So the government, by changing the negative gearing laws, what they're actually doing in reality is essentially making it hard for people to actually get to the first base, which is the poor and the working class, not the fucking wealthy. That is the point, guys. And that is the point that most people have no actual concept of what they're even saying when they're talking about this. So to sit here and say that negative gearing laws are designed to hit the wealthy and give to the poor is absolute bullshit. That's the point. So here's what people said. And I'm going to reply to these one by one in the hope that they can watch this and hear this response. So a guy named Tim said, "It's not often I call BS on something, but come on, this is about the most ridiculous self-serving statements I've ever heard and clearly comes from someone with zero understanding of poverty. And this really doesn't help your case." And he sent a screenshot of my title, which is, helping my clients build wealth with property. So firstly, Tim, this is the one and only comment that I did respond to straight away. I made the mistake of doing so. Firstly, your statement that this is self-serving. Let's just get clear on what your actual argument is. If your argument is my perspective is self-serving, are you trying to imply that the way that I vote, the way that I prefer to see policy shouldn't be self-serving? Then with that logic, what the fuck is a democracy? Isn't the entire point of a democracy is us as the people have the power to vote on what we want? So is your argument that I shouldn't be voting or having a say on what I think would be best for me and my family and my clients and my community? Of course, everything is self-serving. Like any political preference is obviously self-serving. And anyone who thinks that they aren't self-serving is actually delusional and lying to themselves. So firstly, if your argument is that my perspective is self-serving, all political arguments are self-serving, I'm not sure how else to say about the fact that you're accusing me of being self-serving. Now, let's actually dig into what I actually want, right? Let's think about what I do want to self-serve. So first and foremost, let's just say that this negative gearing change has taken place. I'm becoming wealthier from this. So notice how my business, in fact, motivates. We're making more money now than we really ever have. Why? Because all of our clients are now forced to basically build because of the tax. So we were doing that beforehand as well as some established. But all it means is it's actually easy for my clients now to buy new properties because it's tax effective. So from a business point, I'm actually making more money now thanks to these changes. As an investor, and as you guys will know through my response today, you're going to start seeing the mechanics as to why this is going to make properties more expensive. I own multiple properties. That's going to make me wealthier. So again, your logic is starting to implode on itself. Because if this was about being self-serving, I should be happy right now considering my business and my personal portfolio is actually going to make me a lot wealthier. Now, here's the problem. What I'm standing for and what I'm fighting for is for the average person to have the ability to use property as a wealth-generating asset to build themselves wealth. That's what I'm fighting for. That's me being self-serving. Guys, I grew up poor. For most of you who understand my background, I moved to Australia with a single mum when I was 6 years old. For the first couple of years, I remember getting bullied in year 1 because my friends, or who I thought was my friends, found out that I was sleeping on a double mattress with my mum because we couldn't afford a bed frame. I was the poor kid in the public school. I know what it's like to be in poverty. Absolutely. And guess what? I didn't like it. And guess what? My entire life has been a compensation for that as a kid. It'd be fair to say, and I'm sure most of you guys who are long-time listeners can understand this, I am still today running away from what I experienced as a child and being in poverty. And look at my life. Look at how the actions that I'm physically taking at building an investment company, doing all the things that I'm doing, building wealth like an absolute friggin' maniac, purely running away from the trauma that I experienced as a kid being in poverty. So when you say that this is a self-serving statement and clearly comes from someone with zero understanding of poverty, Tim, I call bullshit. Now, Here's the reality. The reason why I'm so pissed off about these law changes is because firstly, the government's got no freaking idea what they're doing, and they're socialists. Let's be honest. What they're trying to do is penalize people who actually want to work hard and get ahead so they can give it to the poor. All right. Now, to be clear, I'm not actually completely against that perspective, by the way, but I am when it's incompetent idiots doing it in the name of things like equality, which is communist talk. Now I have a real problem. More importantly, what I'm trying to preserve and what I'm trying to stand for is everyone's ability to be able to build wealth. And guess what, guys? Like I used that baseball analogy, by them removing negative gearing on established properties, you're disincentivizing property, full stop. By increasing the capital gains tax on all assets, you're disincentivizing property. All of these things are going to lead to one thing: less landlords, less investors, and less rental stock, less houses. The last thing that we need right now is less houses. Why? Because it means the housing market rockets. And again, guys, notice the housing marketing rocket, it makes me wealthier. And notice how I don't want that. Why? I want a balanced market. A balanced market is far more healthier and far more lucrative for everybody, buyers and sellers, not just people like me who own a lot of property. So to sit here and say that this is some kind of ludicrous, self-serving statement, understand what I'm trying to fight for here. I'm trying to fight for the average everyday Aussie's ability to use property as a vehicle to get themselves ahead. And right now, the government is screwing that over. That's what I'm serving, Tim. Now, the next comment was coming from a guy named Anthony. Now, Anthony said, nobody is saying that everyday Australians can't invest in property. They just can't offset their losses against other taxpayers' contributions while doing it. Now, again, Anthony, notice how your perspective is that these wealthy property investors are offsetting their assets against my tax. So Anthony, riddle me this. Let's say we completely disincentivize private property investment for mums and dads. Who's going to be providing the rental stock? So there's some options. We've got the government. Through whose tax money, Anthony? Oh, that's right, your tax money. So by penalizing the private investor and saying that it's unfair that they can't offset their wealthy losses off of my tax, what is your solution then? By implication, the government, but doesn't the same logic mean that they're also using your tax for the exact same thing? So again, just notice how your argument has just completely imploded on itself. But hear me out. Well, let's flesh this out. So option one is we've got the government. They can go and fund all the investment properties. Oh, that's right. They can't because there's not enough tax revenue to do it. And when the government tried to do that back in the day through things like Homes West, it was extraordinarily expensive, not only to purchase, but also to maintain those properties because the people living in those properties destroy them, because there's no repercussions. Now, when I grew up in Gosnells, every third house on my street had punched in doors, had punched in broken windows, shit everywhere. All right. Where I grew up, that was the reality. And guess what, Anthony? Every single one of those maintenance bills came back to us as taxpayers. So this perspective that you've got that, these wealthy investors can't now offset their losses against, our contributions. By admission, you're essentially saying, well, it should be the government's responsibility, which is our tax money anyway, but it's just way more expensive to do that than to incentivize the private investor. So option one, we've got the government, like I said, not going to work. Option two, we could let foreign investors do it. Oh, but that's right. That's also unfair. So let's not let foreign investors do it. Okay, well, option three is to let major corporations, like big hedge funds, like BlackRock or Vanguard, these massive funds on the other side of the world that don't give a shit about you, maybe they can come and buy all of our rental properties. Oh, wait, that's not a good idea? Okay, well, the fourth and only option is then to incentivize the mums and dads to do it through tax, which is exactly what our system is built on. So what are you actually arguing for, Anthony? Are you actually arguing that we should allow the government to do this, which it's not going to happen? Are you arguing that foreign investors should have all the rental properties? Foreign corporations? Or can we actually just agree that the fairest and most equitable system for Australians is maybe just let Australians do it? Once again, I just want to highlight your perspective is famine mentality. Like, just notice that's poverty mindset. Exactly where your thoughts are coming from. Next one was another one from Anthony. It was another one of his comments. He said, genuinely curious on what your view is on the 25 years of taxpayer subsidized wealth creation through existing residential property has done for our broader economy. Let's play a game, Anthony. Simple question. If you genuinely think that we've had 25 years of taxpayer subsidized wealth creation, by admission, you would say that those tax subsidies have increased or decreased the amount of houses that we've got for rent. That's the question. So I'm just going to reiterate that question, right? If you genuinely think we've had 25 years of taxpayer subsidies, have those subsidies increased or decreased the amount of houses we've got available? I think the implication you're saying it has increased the amount of houses that we have. Any reasonable person should come to that conclusion. That means that you're also conceding that it's also helped lower and maintain the prices in relation to demand. In other words, if we didn't have as many houses, we've got the same amount of people, supply and demand, house prices would be even more expensive. So again, just notice how your argument has just completely imploded on itself. Now, Anthony posted up in the third comment. But the answer to unaffordable rental market isn't to preserve tax settings that contributed to it. Since 1999, you might remember what changed then. The property prices have completely outpaced wage growth consistently, and that's not a coincidence. Okay, Anthony, here's the problem. Wage growth and property growth are not correlated in any way, shape, or form, and this proves that all you are doing is simply regurgitating the propaganda talking points. Wages and property prices are not correlated, never have been, never will be, Anthony. People say, oh, but property's got to get to a certain point until we can't afford it. Bullshit. Look at most of the rest of the world. Look at most other major cities out there. You've got these massive populations in places like London, New York, Paris, Hong Kong. You've got X amount of infrastructure, supply and demand. No one can afford to buy real estate in those cities. They are all renting. Most of those lower economies have 40, 50, 60, some 99-year home loans. Why? Because it's the only way they can stretch the repayment out so it's still affordable for the local population. Many countries have intergenerational home loans. Most countries literally have intergenerational living, which means the grandparents, the parents, and the grandkids all live in the same house and share the housing costs because they can't afford to live. That is how most of the world works. Now, for you to sit here and imply that wages must be tied to property prices proves you have no idea what you're talking about, and all you are doing is regurgitating the left-wing bullshit propaganda. Now, to sit here and also imply that this has only happened since 1999, in fact, since they brought in these laws since 1999, that's what's caused the property market to rocket because all these tax settings and all this tax has been pumped into the market. Bullshit. In 1960, it was $8,000 to buy a house. 1970, $15,000. 1980, $39,000. 1990, $96,000. Notice how every 10 years we've basically doubled in price. Why? Because the Australian population is the fastest growing population in the Western developed world, and we cannot keep up with infrastructure. That is why. Notice from 1960 to 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, notice how the growth rates have not changed since the negative gearing has been implemented. So this idea, this concept that you think that, it's all just blown up since 1999 is absolute bullshit, Anthony. That's my point. Now, there is someone named Mel. Mel is a PhD candidate and has said, in my experience, nobody who is breaking out of poverty is in a position to benefit from negative gearing. This is reverse welfareism and it belongs in the bin. Mel, consider this. If negative gearing is a strategy used by people buying the first few properties and literally breaking out of poverty, meanwhile, the wealthy, who are using huge deposits to avoid negative gearing, who are buying their assets in companies and trusts where negative gearing doesn't apply, please explain how that works, Mel. Please. Let's consider what is wealthy. All right, I know I gave you guys a bit of a definition before. Let's say, for example, for my own situation, let's say I've got 5 houses in my own personal name. Let's say I own another 10 houses across multiple companies and trusts. The first 5 are my personal name to offset my personal tax, all negatively geared. Beyond that point, the remaining 10 houses that I've purchased that have made me substantially wealthier were all done in companies and trusts. Please explain to me how the wealthy use negative gearing. Oh wait, another lady named Melissa. To frame this as those getting ahead out of poverty and hit hard is frankly ridiculous. It's not those in poverty buying homes. We can't afford them. We can't afford rent right now. Some of us are living on $400 a week or less. Now, Mel, here's my question. If you can't afford rent today, then doesn't that mean that we would need more rental stock on the market to bring your prices down to help you? Do you understand, Mel, that any policy right now that removes houses from the market and disincentivizes investment is actually going to make your rent more expensive and your life actually worse? Let me ask you a question, Mel. Seriously, if you can't afford rent today, how do you think things are going to go when property prices are over $1 million in every city in the next 6 to 12 months? Do you genuinely think that you're going to be in a better position to get into the market? Genuinely. Now, dude named Scott said, having an investment property is now considered impoverished. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Yes, again, semantics. So here's one of the narratives, right? People saying, if you own an investment property, therefore you are wealthy. What a nonsense point. Here's the reality, guys. Unless you have 5 investment properties or more, you're still working. You are not wealthy. Here are some numbers. Let's say the average home is worth $850, growing at 5% with $30,000 in holding costs per year, right? So what I'm essentially saying here is an $850,000 property growing at 5%, which is about 40 grand a year. Once you take out your holding costs of 10K, you've got about $30,000 a year that you are making mostly in growth on an investment property. Now, what that means, the median income is $94,000 in this country, which means even just to get to a point where your portfolio is making enough in equity to match the median income, you need at least 3 investment properties, which only, by the way, around 8% of investors, all investors get to 3 or more. In other words, you would actually probably make 3 houses completely paid off to replace an income of around $90,000 a year, including some growth. So here's the point. People who have an investment property are not wealthy. You need a substantial portfolio to replace even just the median income. And notice how most people are complaining about the median income can't even pay their fucking bills. So this idea, you've got one investment property and therefore that equals wealthy is absolute nonsense, Scott. Now, someone named Nadika said, if we never had negative gearing for CGT and the CGT discount, Sydney's median house price would sit at, just under $800,000 today. Nadika, how? Like I said, in the 60s it was $8,000, 70s was 15, 80s was 40, 90s was 100. The reality is, explain to me how, since 1999, things have just been different when I've just rattled off 4 decades before that, where it has literally had the exact same pattern. What you are doing is regurgitating the propaganda talking points, Nadika. Now, Bobby said, you can't deny the rich use it to get richer. Most property investors are people with wealth. I am absolutely denying that, Bobby. That is absolute bullshit, mate. Once the average person has bought 3 to 5 houses in their personal name, their income's been offset. They're not paying more tax. Then there is no benefit of buying houses in their personal name to negative gear again. What's the point of negative gearing a property if you've got no income to offset the negative gearing too? Doesn't make sense. Everything moving forward will be in companies and trusts. And like I said, if you're going to sit here and try and convince someone with 3 houses wealthy, I call bullshit. They're still working. They do not have enough income from that portfolio of 3 to 5 houses to replace their income. They are not wealthy. This idea that the rich are using to get wealthier is absolute nonsense. Cool. So that's the comments, guys. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. For those who want to chat, want some help, agree, disagree, please put your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't so far, guys, please subscribe, share this with your friends. This will help us grow the show and bring you some great content week to week. Thank you for listening. Love you all. Have a great week.